So hopefully, if you're watching this, you just watched Stranger Things episodes 1 through 7. Today, we're going to talk about the details, hit on that crazy ending, and prophesize what is going to happen in the final 2 episodes. Let's do it. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are here and you like these spoiler reviews, let me know in the comments and with that like down below. But I want to get right into it. We've already done our non-spoiler review. You know what I think of the season so far. Episode 1, we start out with that crazy 8-minute segment that has already been released online in 1979, a flashback to the violence that we all believe came from 11 and the madness that went down in Hawkins Lab. It immediately starts out on somewhat of a dark note and gives you somewhat of a trajectory of the path that 11 is on this season, still reeling from the events that we've seen, but also the events that we see in this flashback, taking a while to get her powers back. Obviously, I'm super excited to see how all of this plays in, but we're going back to 1980s, or forward to 1986, meeting up with our crew once again, scattered. We have the kids in Hawkins, of course. Joyce has moved to a brand new location with her kids, and then everything going down with Harbour. But now we're focused more on the school and the kids surrounding our main characters, and the 2 main factions of Hawkins, of course, the Hellfire Club, headed up by Eddie, and the basketball team with Jason at the forefront. And Lucas is being torn in both directions because Mike and Dustin, they're over here in the Hellfire Club, and they need Lucas to help them with their big event. It's the giant battle at the end, and they're like, we're not rescheduling this. They're telling Lucas to reschedule the basketball game. And Lucas is like, it's the championship game. What's the championship? Is it all A district? I would have liked to have known that. Just kidding. But, of course, they can't move that either. And Jason, using this pep rally to kind of talking about the victories that have come via the basketball team, but using all of these deaths in Hawkins and the madness that happened in the season prior as kind of a backdrop of, we're going to use that to motivate us. We all need basketball right now. Like, basketball is what those kids need. They need therapy. And some of them are getting therapy. Max, a character who is still reeling from the death of her brother, and I thought somehow they would bring her brother back this season, maybe as one of the demons or something like that, but he sacrificed himself. I think we need to put him and lay him to rest and not bring him back in the future. But she plays an integral role in this season. But like I said, because she's dealing with the loss of her brother and what's going on with her mom, she has to go and talk things out, even though she really doesn't want to. There's also some fallout between she and Lucas. She is not incredibly thrilled about the path that Lucas is on. And I feel like Lucas is almost making himself somewhat of an outcast, even though he really isn't doing anything wrong. He just wanted to play basketball. But there's also that little part of him that says, we can be a part of the popular crowd now. And as we always see in movies and shows like this, that never turns out well. And it always means there's a fallout with your friends. Now, Dustin and Mike, they are together in this first episode, but they do eventually separate because Mike has to go on a trip and see 11, and I guess Will is just kind of there at this point. There's a lot of tension between them when they first meet up. We also have to talk about our other characters in this first episode. Nancy is now the editor of Hawkins' newspaper. She's still with Jonathan, but there's a little something, a little tension between these two, a lot of tension between characters, between these two characters that leads to a bit of a spark between she and Steve down the line, because as we know, Steve and Robin, they are not together. Robin is having trouble. She's struggling finding her thoughts and feelings and how to approach this girl that she really, really likes, but she's saying to herself, do I just come out and say it? Do I hold it in until a little bit later on? And we never get any real resolve with that, so that's something I hope we see a bit later on down the line. But that Steve and Nancy dynamic as we go throughout the episodes kind of had me a bit surprised, because I thought things would be all fine and well with her and Jonathan, but I believe the separation between them is causing some thoughts that that are butting heads with each other. So all of our characters, and I cannot forget in the first episode, Joyce gets this Russian package, and it kind of sparks the idea that Hopper could be alive, because Hopper, and we see this more so in episode 2, is not having a good time in this Russian prison. Anyone who saw the post-credit scene or all of the trailers, all of the marketing, you know that Hopper is still alive, and he jumped out of the way, it seems. I thought it would be a little more complicated than that, but he's taken to a Russian prison, and obviously we have Joyce and Murray, coming to terms with what has happened and realizing that they have to give $40,000 to this colleague in Alaska, and that sets them out on their journey, and their journey is a crazy one, from, the plane crash to the deceit from the person that they had to trust, to actually getting there, recovering Hopper, but having to do it in a very fast-paced manner because Hopper is almost taken out by a Demogorgon. And I loved David Harbour's performance this time around. Even though he's stuck in this purgatory, you can see and feel that he wants to do anything it takes to get back to mainly Joyce, but also get back to, obviously, 11. That is his daughter now. So many things go into that moment when they hug at the end, and there's also this mini storyline, I would say this C storyline. You have the A and then the B, the C storyline of Murray and his black belt karate skills that he uses and utilizes, somewhat convenient, right, for the situation they're in, but he uses and utilizes them to take out a lot of the guards and some of the people that they're trying to trick, and he puts on this Russian accent. So that story in itself was really funny. I didn't love the fact that they just kind of go off and leave the kids, and Joyce's, again, we're always doing this in these types of shows with lying to the people that don't need to be lied to, and because there's deceit there, they're gone in a snap, and those kids could have used the adult to get 11 out of jail, prison, and then she goes a step further into that, and let's go ahead and get into 11's storyline. 11 is being bullied by this girl, and this girl, Angela, man, she's the worst. I see Angela, I'm just like, you're a terrible human being, and everyone around her. That's what felt slightly unrealistic about it. It's like there wasn't one kid that stepped back and said, wow, what we're doing is horrible. Granted, the moment, and I believe it's in episode 1, when 11 goes, ha, and nothing happens, it was kind of like, oh, that's awkward, man. That's just, that's something that would go viral in 2022. But that was a moment where I said, okay, clearly people see and think that maybe she is weird, but there wasn't one kid that stepped in to defend her. And going a step further than that, I thought Will maybe could have done more to defend her. I understand why he did not. He's not that type of personality, but that was kind of like, okay, at least Mike goes to the DJ when they're playing the music to embarrass her, and Mike's trying to do something about it, but there's a lot of, within that triangle of kids there's a lot of lying, not telling each other things, 11 putting on this facade, trying to make Mike think that she's popular, Mike not saying I love you back to 11. I'm curious what that wall is there. And then Will, just kind of the sadness that comes with Mike not reaching out to him maybe as much as he wanted to. So that sort of dynamic relationship was interesting. And then you have Jonathan and his friend Argyle, who are just kind of smoking, Can I say on YouTube what they're smoking? I don't know. Is that a rule? But you know what they're doing. They cannot give a care in the world. Jonathan's kind of dealing with something here with Nancy. He doesn't know what to say, how to approach it. Nancy's dealing with the same thing. She and her friend, who eventually gets by the demon, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But I want to go forward into 11's storyline and talk about the fallout of the bully and getting arrested, and that's kind of what leads these individuals to come after her, and we're trying to figure out, okay, who is... Oh, it's Paul Reiser and the Hawkins Lab crew. But not just the Hawkins Lab crew, we have the return of Papa. That's right, we're not just getting Papa in a flashback, we're getting Papa in real life with a scar. In current time, he is indeed alive, confirming a lot of people's theories all throughout the first couple of seasons. Yes, he's here. How did he survive? Again, with same thing with Hopper. I don't know, but he did, and he's here, and he's wanting to bring back the powers of 11, reawake, right, what she had prior because of this new threat that we are facing, that all of the Hawkins kids are dealing with right now. We'll get into that storyline here in just a second. But as of now, 11 is having to remember all of those memories that she forgot about, and he brings them about in a very interesting way, placing her in the water and trying to spark something that gives her her powers back, and we see eventually, inevitably, we get those back at the end of this season. But as of now, we're watching episode to episode her relive her past, and this is where one of our new characters comes into play. This is the character of Peter, someone who befriends 11 as she's going through all of this at Hawkins Lab, and again, we'll talk about it. At first, it seems like he's a really good person, and I loved the performance here. It was so freaking believable. It's manipulative, as we find out later, but it's an incredible performance. So Elle, throughout most of the season, is in this lab reliving these memories, and this is something that I took not issue with, but it was one of my, one of the elements that didn't quite work for me as well, because every time we would cut to 11 in the lab, it would break the tension of what was happening elsewhere, whether that be in Hawkins or whether that be with what's happening with Mike and Will and, being held captive, all of those things. So I was enjoying getting to see the storyline from 11, but I wasn't as on board with the pacing of these sequences. But as we see later on, they are maybe the most important sequences of this season. And looking back on it, I think the buildup of that is fairly brilliant, and I'm so glad that they did it. But I want to go right into what's happening with 11's crew, at least the crew that she was with at the beginning of the season, with Mike and Will and Jonathan and Argyle, who gets taken into it because obviously she goes and she does the thing to her bully. She kind of knocks her bully out. That's what gets her arrested. The rest of our crew, they're placed on house arrest. We get a great conversation between Will and Mike. They're kind of, bringing back that friendship. But then we get this crazy one-take battle where everyone's coming in, shooting at our kids. They're after 11. They're trying to find out where 11 is, and we see, one of the individuals who took 11. He's getting interrogated. They're dunking his head in water. They're trying to get answers, and they do inevitably get answers, and I think that's going to lead us into, the next batch of episodes 8 and 9. But that storyline is fairly basic after everything that goes down at the school. We have Mike, we have Will, we have those kids who are there without any adults. They escape because Argyle pulls up and they get in with the wounded officer and they're off on their mission. That's about that. And we really didn't get them. Did we get hardly any of them in episode 7? I don't really remember even referencing them. It was a long episode, but their storyline kind of ends with episode 6. But let's go all the way back, since we've talked about all of these separate stories now, and get into what's happening in Hawkins with Nancy's friend and this poor girl who is the first victim of this season. Poor Eddie, leader of the Hellfire Club, he gets caught up in this entire situation because Chrissy, well, it looks like there's an exorcism happening right in front of Eddie, and the fear displayed by his character is exactly what I was feeling. When I said this first episode was extremely dark, and this season is darker than anything we've seen. We've never seen body horror on this level in this show that we thought was solely for families and kids. It's not for kids anymore. I mean, kids have grown up watching it, and they're going to keep watching it, but seeing a 5-year-old watch her body get ripped and her eyeballs explode and her body contort, I don't think I could handle that as a parent. So this is not a show that I would recommend for kids, because we get a scene like this at the end when Chrissy gets attacked and we don't know who this demon is or what he's all about. We slowly start to find out who he is, but she dies, and dies morbidly in front of Eddie. And Eddie, being the one there, he is the main suspect by the police. Our police chief, played by Rob Morgan. Here's a picture of me and Rob Morgan at the Critics' Choice Awards. He is the best. in real life and in the show. But Chrissy is the first victim, and poor Fred is the next victim. They go to investigate, and poor Nancy has to find another friend that has died. And what is killing these kids? And we know at this point it's not Eddie. We saw that it's not Eddie. No one else knows that but our crew and Dustin, who knows that Eddie is innocent, and Nancy, who is kind of realizing what's going on here, at least that it wasn't a human being who did this. They all come together, talking Dustin, Steve, Max, Robin, eventually Erica, who I didn't mention they brought in as the third Hellfire Club player, and our group of jock/bullies. They go to Erica, they bully Erica, and they are trying their very best to get to Eddie. So we have the police after Eddie, we have the cool crew after Eddie. They realize that Lucas is trying to help Eddie, so they turn on Lucas as well. And essentially, we now have our crew of Dustin, Steve, Max, Lucas, Robin, and Eddie. And then we have the new information of somebody by the name of Victor Creel. While doing research, Nancy and Robin find out that there is a belief from Creel that this vengeful demon was responsible for the murder of his family back in 1959. And the modern version of Victor Creel played none other than Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself. So that was pretty cool to see. You see, he doesn't have eyeballs, so that's a little scary, but they kind of force their way in to talk to him, have a conversation, and they're just trying to get answers as to, does that demon, all the way back in 1959, have anything to do with what's happening now? And in the midst of this, we find out that Vecna, that's the name that we have given our demon here, is going after his next target, and that is Max. And this is where Max's storyline becomes so prominent. And episode 4, for me, and I believe this is the episode when all of it goes down, was so phenomenally done. The tension of getting the answers. Okay, how do we kind of stop this from happening? Okay, we play music. Can we save Max's life? Max is on the verge of death because Vecna is after her. And what are Vecna's motivations? We know that Vecna is going after the kids. What pushes Vecna to do this? All of these questions are slowly being answered as we progress through the series, but Max is almost dead in this episode because she is stuck in this trance at Billy's grave, knowing that her time was ticking, doing everything she can to escape, and she actually does. She makes it out. And the emotion from Dustin and Lucas and these kids, man, that was a great, heartfelt moment. One of the better, emotional moments since Will was first discovered dead in season 1. So I thought it was great. This is also the episode where Steve is asking great questions here. How is Vecna choosing his victims? Is this connected to the Mind Flayer? Because we've already dealt with the Mind Flayer in the past. We thought that was over. We don't know the connection just yet at this point, but we do kind of get a hint as to what it is. And does this have anything to do with the murders of the Creel family? All right, so now is when we follow Dustin's malfunctioning compass to the bottom of Lover's Lake, where we know that Patrick was killed. Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie, they go off in search of it, leaving Dustin, Lucas, and Max getting scooped up by Powell. So they don't have the opportunity to cross over because the cops catch them. But Steve, after being told, hey, don't do this, it's risking everything, dives to the bottom of the lake where he discovers the gate that they were looking for all along. It's glowing, it's red, it looks kind of like the Eye of Sauron or just a big tentacle-shaped thing. It's in the poster. You see it in the poster. But the rest of the crew dives after him, and they arrive in the Upside Down. Here's what's crazy about this entire adventure, right? They're in this other version, this alternate version of their universe, but it's actually 1983, which is when Will first disappeared. So they're in a past version of the current universe that our other heroes are in, and using the lights, they hear the voices of those in this alternate universe. Using the lights, they communicate back and forth with each other and discover that they have to find a way back to our world, a different way back because they can't come the way that they swam in. But they realize that every time Vecna kills someone, there is a portal that kind of opens up. So that's their ticket. That's their key. Are they going to be able to do it? So they're both kind of hustling to that spot, right? But Vecna is after one of our heroes. It's no longer Max. Who is it? This time, it's Nancy, who gets these flashes of Barb and all of the crazy things that's happened to her, and Vecna has kind of a good grip on Nancy's soul. But this is when all of these storylines converge, and this is when we learn who Vecna really is, because Nancy's walking around in the home that Vecna lived as a child, and we slowly start to realize that Vecna is the child of Victor Creel. Wait just a second. So Vecna is the child, but how does that tie into 11's storyline? Because we continue to flash back to Peter. And if we start to put these times together in our head, we realize that child in 1959 discovers, and we get some insight into this, all of these weird, creepy things, and that he can do things that other people can't. He is essentially the first, aka number one. So everything that happens to his family is actually because of him. This child was the one who did it, and the child never died. So he gets taken, experimented on by Papa, grows into Peter, who we know that is and has been having all of these conversations with 11. And we thought Peter was a good guy, but then 11 walks in and discovers that Peter is the one who takes out all of these children, and 11 realizes that she has to fight back against the one who we thought was a good person in the first place. So this battle begins, and 11 versus 1, Peter versus someone that has to find herself, find her strength, and finding it in this flashback allows her to find it in real life. And we see the transformation from Peter to Vecna, and, you know, discovering it. And I believe that was the first example of a portal into that world, and that world looks a lot like hell. It's what I would imagine hell would be. But essentially, he's pushed into the upside down. All of this happening in 1979, which is 4 years before we saw everything happen in 1983. So Vecna has been alive this entire time, and is he what set everything in motion in the first place? Is he the general for the Mind Flayer, or is the Mind Flayer working for him? That's what it seems like. It feels like he's the one in charge of all this, where the kids think Vecna is the one working for the Mind Flayer. And will we get a true confirmation of what the Upside Down actually is? Was this something that existed and there was just a portal that was opened up? Or was this something that was created by the combination of 11 and 1? It feels to me like it existed, but he was just pushed into it and essentially becoming the ruler of this world. So Vecna, it feels like, has been the villain this entire time, and now that we know he is this creation, is he going to be coming back into our world, or will he continue to go after these kids and eventually get a confrontation once again? This will be a rematch between he and 11. That's what it's all coming down to, right? There will inevitably be a big showdown between he and 11. Will it happen at the end of the season, or will it happen in season 5, which will be the one, I believe, coming out next year? So all of these questions I'm asking myself, but at the end of the day, there are so many things up in the air right now. Like, is Nancy going to be okay? Because Nancy is still not safe. What is happening right now with Mike and Will and Jonathan? Because we really didn't get an update on their storyline in this final episode. And where do we go now with our team now that we know the true identity of Vecna? 11 now knows the true identity of Vecna because she has all these memories. She also has her powers. Do we see the full team reunite at the end of the season in either episodes 8 or 9? And does Hopper, Joyce, and Murray come back? Everything coming together, seeing Peter make that transition from a child to someone that believes that he can do what he intends to do, but keeping 11 alive, and then turning into this demon general, if you will, in Vecna. It's super cool, and I just realized I've been talking for forever. This is a lengthy spoiler review, folks, so sorry I talked for so long, but there was so much to cover in this season, but I'm glad we got the opportunity to do it. Hey, if you guys are still here, if you're still watching, drop that like, man. This is going to take forever to edit. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you talking about your theories and speculation and what actually happened with this ending. We know what happened, but what's going to happen now? What are your thoughts on the future of Stranger Things coming in July with those next 2 episodes? You guys are the best. Thanks again for watching. I'll be seeing you very soon.